Hello everyone. Uh, Welcome to this very first video class in this new strategy of tech-enabled teaching and learning. So let's see how this goes, and we're going just to keep going as I would do any of my regular classes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to thank you all for being here, and for taking the time to actually see in this class. We'll also have a live session, but we'll talk about that in a second. Before I go with the class, I just want to mention a couple of things that I don't want to forget. The first thing is the assessment. As of today, the assessment will remain the same. So we'll have our first CA, which is due in a couple of weeks' time, so due on the 4th of April, which is worth 25%. We will have a second a CA due on the 16th of May, which is another 25%, and we have an exam, which is 50% of your final grade. There is a chance that this teaching from home gets extended longer than the 29th of March. So that can happen. And we are getting ready for this. However, let's go with the official announcement. And the official announcement says that schools and colleges are going to be closed until the 29th of March. Let's not panic and let's stick to those dates. However, as I said before, the college is getting ready in case we need to go any longer with this kind of strategy. And of course, if there is any change, we'll let you know in due time, okay? So we're going to have a first live session online the upcoming Friday, 27th of March. That would be at the regular time of your class. So in the case of Group A, your class is going to be at 9 a.m. And in the case of Group B, it would be at 12 p.m. There is going to be a link for that up on Moodle. So I make sure that you have the link on Moodle before the class, and I'll see you online. And the idea is to discuss the things that we're going to be talking about in this video class. The lab session also will take place, and I also will have an exercise prepared for you, and I expect you to do the exercises during the live session. And of course, during the live session, I might do a little bit of coding as well as a solution of the live session. Again, this is a learning curve for not only for yourself, but also for ourselves. So we're hoping that this goes as best as possible. Okay. Regarding CA1, some of you have emailed me, and I'll be, as I said before, I'll be getting back to you by the end of this week. So between today's Thursday and tomorrow Friday, maybe Saturday, but I'll be coming back to you. I have already come back to some of the people. But something that I want everybody to be aware of is that the next two classes, which are the next two that I'm going to post on Moodle as soon as I have them ready, these two classes are important for the CA. So the builder pattern and the DAO pattern are very, very important for the CA. So I'll be posting those today. So make sure you take the time to take a look at these classes, because they are going to be relevant for your CA. Okay. Last class, what was the last thing that we did in class? So we were doing the factory pattern and the abstract factory pattern. So these two patterns that we did last week, they were the second and third creational pattern of the ones that we've done during the semester. So we did a singleton pattern, factory pattern, abstract factory pattern. And what we're going to do today is going to be the builder pattern. Now, something that I want to mention is that there are other creational patterns that we're not going to touch on this module, on this course, because we wouldn't have time to touch on all of them. But I think we've been touching on 4 of them that are really, really relevant. So the singleton would be for creation of a single instance of a class with a universal access point. The factory, so when I have multiple subclasses that they're all inheriting from a superclass, so I can create an instance of any of the subclasses without having access to that code. The abstract factory, then when I have subclasses of an abstract class, but I also will have subfactory of an abstract factory. And the advantage of this was that it makes your code more expandable, more flexible for expansion. There was a trade-off in there that the structure of the code is more complex, but it is more modular. So although the factory is a little bit cheaper to produce because it's easier to produce, the abstract factory would be better for expansion. Now, as I said, well, the plan for today for this video class is to do the builder pattern. So let's get to it. So in order to see what the pattern, what the builder pattern is for, let's take a look at the factory pattern and the abstract factory pattern that we've done before. So when you are, or when we are creating a new instance, we just go to the factory. For example, my class, my object equals my factory. In this case, this would be the regular, it would be either the regular factory or the abstract factory, but you go to the factory class and call the static method get object or get instance. And then you need to define what type you have or what type you want to get from the factory. And then you need to pass all the attributes that that instance is going to need. So let's try to remember the credit card system that we built a couple of weeks ago. So not only I needed to say whether I wanted Visa, MasterCard or Maestro or Amex, but I also need to pass in the attributes that the card needs, like card number, CVV, and name in the card. And then if it was a case of the abstract factory, it was something similar. I need to define, I need to call my factory class and call the static method get instance or get object, and then I need to pass in an instance of one of the subfactories. So for example, if the card that I wanted was a Visa card, so I need to pass an instance of the Visa factory. If I want a Maestro card, then I need to pass in an instance of the Maestro factory. And then of course, in both cases, I need to pass in the attributes, card number, CVV, and card name. So I wonder if any one of you can see what the problem is with these two approaches. And the problem is that I need, not only that I need to define the attributes, but also those attributes, they have to come in a given particular number, order. And that is an important thing, and that is prone to error. So if the object had many attributes in the constructor, this might be a little bit problematic, particularly because you cannot guarantee that the client class is going to handle the attributes in the correct order. Now, the developer of the client class should take care of the order, and they should be able to pass the attributes in the correct order, but there are other ways of making this a little bit more a little bit better and a little bit more modular. So that's exactly what we're going to have a look with the builder pattern. So the solution is, what if instead of putting all the attributes in the constructor, we can define methods to assign the values to those attributes. And if this way, any of the methods can be called in any order. So I don't need to pass in the attributes in the constructor in the particular order, but I can just call the method of the attributes that I want to set in any order, because I'm calling methods independently. And then if some of the methods are not called, well, we can define default values for them. And that's what the builder pattern is going to be. This is a great definition of the builder pattern. Well, these are the ideas of the builder pattern, so make sure you understand this before you go ahead. If you need a few minutes to understand these points, just pause the video and make sure you understand this. So, if you want to give it a go, I have posted up Moodle a Visa card, and that Visa class is similar to the one we used the last class with the factories. It's not exactly the same. It has a couple of extra attributes, so you can practice your attributes. But try to implement the builder pattern in that. Now, I'm not gonna give you, I'm not gonna let you blind in there. I'm going to give you a few hints. First of all, the builder class will be an static inner class within the visa class. So I'm giving you the visa class, so you have to build an inner class inside the visa class, and that will be the builder. The constructor of the visa class must be modified. There must be some modifications in there. I'm not telling you right now what it is. There should be some changes in there. Try to figure out how the client is going to create the new instance of the visa class. So remember, the client is not going to create the instance directly saying visa my visa equals new visa. So it's going to do it through the constructor. It's going to do it through the builder, which is an inner class. Of course, the builder will have a constructor itself, but the constructor of the visa class is never going to be called. So if you want to give it a go, I would invite you to pause the video and try to figure it out on your own. If you want to do some research, give yourself a good 5 to 10 minutes to try to do it. And then you can compare what you do with what I'm going to do next, or if you don't manage to get it done, then just go back to this video where I'm going to explain it. Now, the builder pattern is going to solve the problem of multiple attributes in a large number of optional parameters. So in the class that I've given you, you'll see a couple of extra parameters that I have put in there. So I'm just going to show you that. So if you see in this class, I should use my magnifier for this. There you go. So the visa class has number, name, CVV, but I have some optional parameters in there that I have defined. For example, it's chip enabled, it's contactless enabled, and allows offline transactions. So in my constructor, I have my minimum requirements, but notice that in my constructor, I haven't defined any values for these attributes in here. And then I just have the toString methods and the different setters. Sorry, there's different getters. I haven't put any setters in there. And that's where we need to go to the builder pattern. Good. So the whole point of this is we want to avoid inconsistent states, and we want to provide a way to build the objects step by step and provide methods that will actually return the final object. So we'll see in a second what that means. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this slide step by step, but step by step I'm also going to be doing a little bit of coding. So I'm hoping between PowerPoint, the recording tool, and Eclipse, I don't freak out because it's still the first one. So let's see how it goes. The first thing that we need in that pattern, in that class, is we need a static nested class, and that is going to be the building. And that class should have all the arguments that are coming from the outer class. So let's do that first of all. So I'm going to go to my visa class, and inside my visa class at the very end, I'm just going to add that static inner class. So I'm going to call it public static class builder visa. We can call it visa builder or builder visa, absolutely up to you. Something that is important is that the builder word should be in the name of the class. Why? Because that's naming convention. So I need to let other programmers know that this inner class is the builder of the outer class. The other thing that we said before is that all of the attributes that the outer class has, the inner class should have them too. So I'm adding to the builder visa class, which is an inner class and is static, I'm adding the number, the name, the CVV, and the is chip enabled, contactless enabled, and allows offline transactions as part of the part of that particular class. Now I should be able to get back in here. Yeah, I can manage to flip between PowerPoint and Eclipse. Now, the next point here that I have pointed out for you is that the naming conventions should be follow, and the name, if the class is computer, then the builder class should be called computer builder. Again, you can use computer builder or builder computer. That really doesn't make much difference, but it's important that the word builder is in there. So in our case, we call this builder Visa. Now the builder class should have a public constructor with all the required attributes as parameters. But this is an important one, required parameters. So notice that one of the parameters, some of the parameters are required, as some of them are optional. So that's something that we definitely need to keep in mind. So let's have a look at this. Out of these parameters, which one would be required? Well, required would be number, name, and CVV, while chip, contactless, and allows offline transaction, those are not required, those would be optional. So in my constructor, I'm going to only include those bad boys in there, and I'm going to make that constructor public. So public builder Visa, and in here I'm going to define int number, string name, and int CVV, and I'm going to define those in here. This the number is equals to number, this the name is equals to name, and this dot CVV is equals to CVV. Yeah, so that's what the instruction is telling us. So let's go back to the slide. So the next thing is the class should have method to set optional parameters and should return the same builder object after setting the optional parameter. So I need a setter for each one of the optional parameters, but not only is enough to set the parameters, I also need to return the object builder. And we'll see the use of that in a second, I promise. But just take my word for that for a second. So let's do that. So let's say public, and I said this is going to return the same builder. So I'm going to say public builder Visa, and I'm going to say set chip enabled, for example. And then that set chip enable is going to receive a Boolean to define whether it is chip enabled or not. And of course, this is going to be a setter saying this is chip enabled is equals to what? To is chip enable. Great. This is still complaining because I need to return an instance of the class. So I need to say return this. Now take your time to digest this bit. So I have an instance of the builder class, and remember, an instance of the builder class is not an instance of the Visa class. So I have an instance of the builder. In the builder, I'm defining whether it is chip enabled or not using the setter. So I'm putting that variable in the member class attribute. And once that has been done, I'm returning this very same instance of the class. And I will repeat the same thing for all three of the attributes. Now, thanks to the magic of TV, just like in TV with cooking kind of shows. I've done the other two constructors off camera just to save a little bit of time. But the methods are exactly the same thing as the first one that we did. So I'm saying builder visa set contactless enable, and I'm saying is contactless enable. That is going to be an attribute or a parameter of this particular method. And then that value is going to be assigned to the member class attribute. And then returning this instance of the builder visa class. And the same thing for set allows offline transactions. So I'm doing exactly the same mechanics for all three optional variables. Something that I didn't mention in the slides, but is also important is, well, I did mention it in a previous slide, which is the fact that this class should assign a default value for these parameters. So these parameters, if the methods are not called, these parameters should have a default value. So that default value is going to be defined in my constructor. So I'm just going to say this that is chip enables equals to false. But I'm just defining false by default because I just decided that. But if by default in my context I should have to put it true, that's fine. So it's just whatever default value is reasonable for you to have in there. So this that is contactless enable is equals to false, and this that allows offline transactions is equals to false. Brilliant. Now I'm just saving this, and let's take a look at the class. So my builder class has all the parameters that the outer class has. It has a constructor with the required parameters. In this case are number, name, and CVV. And I'm assigning default values for the optional parameters. And then I have my setters for each one of the optional parameters. Great. So what else do we have in the PowerPoint presentation? So the builder must provide a build method that will return the object created by the builder class to the private constructor in the outer class. So I'm mentioning here a couple of things that are important. The first one, I need to have a build method, and that method will return the object created by the builder class. So that is the instance of the visa class. So that's something we can do already. But the other thing that I'm mentioning there is that the outer class will have a private constructor, and that's something we haven't defined. So let's go to the outer class and let's define my private constructor, and let's see what we can do. So in my outer class, I have my public visa number string, number, name, and CVV. Well, one of the changes that we need to do here is that this is going to be private. Now let's think about it for a second. It makes sense that the visa class has a private constructor, not because it is a singleton, but because I want to guarantee that any instantiation of the visa class is done through the builder. I want to make sure that the builder is the one in charge of creating instances of the visa class and nobody else. Now, something that is important to keep in mind in here as well is the fact that the constructor is private doesn't mean that the inner class won't be able to access it. On the contrary, because the inner class is a member of the outer class. And remember, all private methods or attributes are going to be available only inside the class. Well, my inner class builder is actually a member of this visa class. So the builder class will be able to access that constructor because it lives inside. Now, speaking in terms of the parameters, if I'm not going to be passing anymore the number, the name, or the CVV, so who will I pass then? Well, it's not a coincidence that we define that the builder visa class will have all of the attributes that particular class has. So in here, we can define as a parameter an instance of the builder visa class that I'm going to call builder. And then that is saving us a lot of problems because I know the builder will bring with it all of the attributes that I need. So I can get the number from the builder dot number. And I can get the same thing from name, from the builder dot name. And I can get the same thing for the CVV. So the object builder will bring all of the attributes that the visa has. So the number, the name, and the CVV will come in the instance of the builder visa. So because it's coming from the builder, I can go to the builder and get the number. I can go to the builder and get the name. I can get to the builder and get the CVV. And not only that, I can do the same for all the rest of the attributes. So I can say this that is chip enable is equals to what? To builder that is chip enable. And I can say this that is contactless enable is equals to builder that is contactless enable. And finally, this that allows offline transactions is equals to the builder that allows offline transactions. So now we see how modular this is, because even if I don't pass in the attributes, the builder object will contain all of the attributes, whether they are the defined value or not. But also, even better, if I don't decide or if I don't define any value for any of the optional attributes, well, the constructor has already given a default value for them. So if you change that default value, that's fine. But if you don't change it, at least the object is consistent. All of the attributes in the object will have some sort of value. So that is very important in there. Okay, as I am learning as I go, I just decided to put my picture somewhere in this corner, I think. Because I noticed in the previous take that my picture was taking a little bit of code. It wasn't really much, but I'm just decided to change it to the opposite corner anyway. So from this last bit, the only thing that I'm missing is the build method, and that's the last thing that we're going to do in order to get this builder pattern complete, and that's the next thing that I want to do now. So let's go to that builder method, get my magnifier glass, and that builder method is going to return the instance of the visa class that we are looking for. So I'm going to call it public, and what is it going to return? Of course, it's going to return a visa object, so I'm going to call it build. And this is going to return a new visa, but we have already modified the constructor of the visa class, so it takes an instance of the builder class as a parameter. So in this case, this method is going to pass itself to the visa class. Why? Because this instance of the constructor will have everything that is needed in order to get the instance. Brilliant. So the method is the pattern has already been built. We have everything that we need in there. So the only thing we're missing now is to actually create an instance of the visa using the builder class. So now that we have the code done, I invite you to stop the video for 5 to 10 minutes and try to do it yourself and try to get that working. So you have everything there, just give it a go. Okay, I don't know if you have or not, but I'm just going to try to give that a go myself now. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new class. On that new class, I'm going to call it main. That's going to be my driver. I'm going to include there the main method. Perfect. So as I said, I need to have an instance of the builder class. So there are different ways of doing this. I'm going to do 2 ways. So the first one would be saying builder visa. I'm going to call this builder, is equals to, so I need to get an instance of the builder visa class. So how do I get the builder visa? Well, I know the builder visa is an inner class, and although it is static, it can live without an instance of the outer class. I need to say where it lives. So I need to say visa dot builder visa. So that's just defining and letting Java know where to find the builder visa class, and that builder visa class lives inside the visa class. So I'm going to say, okay, this is my builder. It's going to be equals to a new visa dot builder visa, and of course I need to pass in my parameters. So I need to be able to pass in there the number, the name, and the CVV. So the number, I'm just going to put a dummy number there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The name is Amilcar, and the CVV is 64654. Now I have the visa. Now straight away I can, if I want, I can get my visa if I want it. So I can go say visa. I'm going to call this v1 because I'm going to create a few later. So I'm going to say visa v1 is equals to builder that build. And that's it. That is going to give me the instance of the visa that I need with these parameters. But something that is important to keep in mind, because I didn't define any values for the optional parameters, which are whether it is chip enabled or not, or whether it is contactless enabled or not, or whether it allows offline transactions. All those parameters will have default values, and that's exactly what this builder is doing for me. So the second thing is, suppose I wanted to have one of those parameters. So if I did wanted to have one of those parameters, all I have to do is to say, once I have the instance of the builder, so I can say builder that, and I can go and say, for example, set allows offline transactions, and I can say true. And we're happy with that. So that builder now has that parameter. So from there, I can go and say visa b2 is equals to builder that build. So that's going to create a brand new instance. But the difference is that the first one is not, it doesn't allow offline transaction, but the second one will allow offline transactions. Why? Because in the builder I have set that, and as soon as I say builder that build, it will take that new parameter in there. This is actually, this is where things get very, very interesting. Do you remember that my constructor, that my builder returns the instance of the builder visa? Well, this is the usefulness of this. I can do the whole thing in just one line. So I can just ignore what I've just done, and I can do the whole thing in just one go. So I can say visa v3, for example, is going to be equals to a new visa dot builder visa, and I pass in my values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh. I think it's a good idea that we're doing online teaching and learning. So I can say I can get my instance visa new builder, but straight away I can go and say set, for example, dot set chip enable, which is true, and straight away dot set contactless enable true, and straight away dot build. Because these methods are, let me just complete the values. I'm going to see AA and 1, 2, 3. So because these methods are returning the builder, well, this thing is a builder because it is a new instance of the builder visa class. But then from that builder, I'm calling the chip enable true, but that is returning the builder again. So I can call the set contactless enable straight away. And that thing is also returning the builder again. And from the builder, I can call the build method. And there it is. I have my Visa V3 with no problem. So the only thing to make sure that I'm not lying to you here is I should print those things to the console. Let's say, what happens if I say system.out.println v1 v2 no. v2 and v3. There you go. So my visas are there. Now I didn't add anything regarding the parameters, the additional parameters that we defined. But if you did include that in the toString method, you would be able to see that the first one is false for all the three additional parameters, that the second one is true for one of them, and the third one is true for only two of them. So the builder pattern is really, really helpful when you have these multiple attributes and you don't know how the client is going to behave. So you are providing the client with a different, with a more modular approach to decide whether they want to use the additional parameters or not. And the other thing, which is even more important, you want to make sure that your additional parameters, if they are not set, so you give them a default value. And that's what these builder allow. Of course, I can do that directly in the constructor. I can do a double constructor, but at least with this pattern, the visa cannot be created on its own. So it's really good and modular. Okay. Now, notice that the outer class has only getters methods and no public constructor. We've discussed that already. And that there is no way to create an instance of the Visa class or the outer class without builder. So that's what we made the Visa constructor private. So I cannot go and say Visa, my Visa equals new Visa. I need to go and do it through the builder. Some implications: this doesn't work well when I have subclasses from an abstract class. So the example that we did last week with an abstract card, Visa, MasterCard, and Maestro as subclasses of the abstract class, that doesn't really work well with the builder class, with the pattern. However, it works very, very well when I have this situation in which I have multiple attributes for the same entity. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. So if I have, for example, an entity called country, and that country had multiple attributes, that this would be a good pattern to use. So if you know what I mean. So I'll give you a couple of exercises. The first one that I would like you to do is to include in the toString method of the Visa card the parameter, the additional parameters, so you can see that on your console. So add those in the toString method so you can see how those parameters have been set when you run the program and you print the objects. The other thing that you would that it would be a good idea for you to try to do is that thing that I have on the slide, which is try to make this work from a subclasses from an abstract class. So suppose in this case you want to build a class for Visa, MasterCard, and Maestro, but when you have all of them being subclasses of a card abstract class. So how would you approach that? Give that a go, and if you want, we can discuss it on the live session. Okay, guys, this was a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but it's not terrible, especially because it was supposed to be done in a long class, in a 2.5 hours class. So I think this video is going to end up being something like 35 or 40 minutes. So make sure you have a look at the video beforehand. Make sure you do the code beforehand, and then we'll discuss it in the live session. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.